I don't know. Do you remember doing this before? Once before, we didn't do it. We did it in person, I believe,
Yeah, that's right.
some years back
Yes.
in the before times.
I know. Yeah, very much so.
And this is my friend Cathy, who you'll realize who
Hey,
has
Rob.
she's a novelist, and among other
Hi.
things, this is her
Hello.
more recent novel, Immigrant Heart. I started reading it, and she's a beautiful writer, by the way. You're a very, really good writer.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Cathy. But also has some a fairly strong knowledge base of the adult film business. So
Right.
I just thought, it's kind of nice to have more of a conversational thing. So I invited her.
Yeah, no, I think this will be exciting. So yeah,
Good.
pleased to share the podcast space.
Rob,
Yeah.
where is the book the in the timeline now? What's the I forgot to look. Is it currently available? I believe it is, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's right here.
And here.
Okay. So
They did
yeah,
send me a PDF, but I asked for a hard copy. I do better.
right. No, it
I
came
read
out.
the PDF. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, we should get you a nice copy. But yeah, it came out at the end of March, I think.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. And okay, so and by way of full transparency, I don't know if the publicist mentioned to you my background with Radley.
Oh no, not
Yeah.
at all.
He cast me in his last film, and no,
Last
that's
film.
not true at all.
What do you mean last film?
Anybody cast me in an erotic film, it would be their last film. That's not. I'm joking, but I did have some. I did. A producer friend of mine and I reached out. She worked at First Run Features, so automatically you'll see the connection there.
Yeah.
They released a box set of Radley's films 15 years ago, 12. I don't know,
Yeah, more like
maybe.
25, I think. But
Oh wow, okay.
yeah.
So we were thinking of maybe collaborating, and so we approached Radley, and he seemed open at that particular moment. This would have been 10 years ago, and he was open to being a subject of a documentary, was willing to explore it. We had a number of meetings.
Oh right.
Yeah, and it would be like the dead of winter, and he would just show up in his, shirts, like in his shirt, like no jacket, no coat.
Uh-huh.
It was like very, but what a beautiful energy he brought.
Yeah.
I mean, he was already, you could see, you know, I was concerned because he was clearly, beginning to get frail, but his humor and his, just overall personality was just warm and engaging. And he
Absolutely.
was, and you may know, like he had this younger partner, and they just kind of wanted money, and it just was weird because we hadn't even gotten to the fundraising part yet, But what we were hoping to do at the time was to get one good big interview, like the foundation of it, because we could
Right.
do anything once we had that.
Wow.
But it kind of it kind of sabotaged the idea because they just kind of wanted this bunch of money, and we weren't anywhere near ready, and we didn't think we could get that kind of money for such an independent effort, So so it kind of fell apart pretty quick, and then he passed away not too long after.
Right. Oh, that's a
And
shame.
it's difficult because, in the adult industry, everything is monetized. So it's the way that people think in the industry, even though Radley kind of skirted back and forth. My background, Rob, is in my other life, I was known as Ariel Hart. I was a writer. I wrote a bunch of scripts, and I was a PA in the industry. I never met Radley, but I met a lot of people who knew him. Like I was very close with Gloria Leonard, and so I love, especially the talking about the opening of Misty Beethoven, which was her first film.
Yeah. Yeah. About when was that you're working in the adult film industry?
For me, it was the late 1980s, early 90s. So I went by
Uh-huh.
the name Ariel Hart because my cousin through marriage was Veronica Hart. So I
Oh,
took
that's
her
funny.
surname.
Ah,
That was your Henry Paris.
Yes, it was.
yes.
Um,
That's terrific. Wow. So yeah, no, I'm sure you know much more or whereof you speak than I do. I mean, I just like yeah. I
I
was
don't
just looking
know.
at this as history as opposed to lived experience.
Well, talk about let's begin maybe, Rob, if you could talk about like why you chose to write Man of Taste in the first place.
And to go from a book on slapstick to
Yeah.
this, it's a nice and interesting leap, you know.
It is. It is a bit of a shift of gears. Not completely. I mean, all of the work that I've done has been on taste in some shape or form. But I don't know. I mean, there's a certain sense in which, like, writing this book felt like a kind of inevitability to me.
Hmm.
Uh, when I um, when I first started, when I got my first full-time job at University of Toronto, I was my office neighbor, Bart Tester. He introduced himself and then told me that he knew that I liked that I was planning to teach a class on cult cinema, and so he told me that he had written an essay on Radley Metzger. And actually, at that point, I didn't know anything about Radley Metzger, so I read the article. That was my first exposure to him. Started watch some of the films. And then I moved to Columbia in 2012, and Hilary Brower,
Hmm.
because I was teaching the cult film class there as well, and still do. And she said, "Well, I know Radley Metzger. Like he would, like
What?
I should introduce you to him." So I was like, "Oh, okay, great." So that happened, and then he would come to my class, like to introduce his.
Wow.
I basically created a whole unit that was just designed to give an opportunity to screen the Lickerish Quartet,
Yeah.
which was the film that he always insisted on my screening. And so I got in touch with him, and not like we were close or anything like that, but we would correspond over email occasionally, look, primarily in relation to bringing him into class and then getting him paid. I guess that's the common theme here. And then he died, and I felt like that something had slipped through my fingers. That I had an opportunity to actually talk to this guy, and I didn't seize on that opportunity. But the more I felt this kind of regret, the more determined I felt to actually to see what happens if I do some research here. Like, what can I come up with? And the consequence was is the book. Although there was one last twist here, which was like just about when I was about to start writing, early in the pandemic, like very early, I think, like that's in 2020. I was browsing eBay and I noticed some personal effects of Radley's online, like things that no one would have a right to have except for him. What happened was that he had a storage unit that got auctioned,
Oh my.
and so the person who bought the storage unit was putting it all online, and like everything was $10 for each thing. So I mean, it sounds very extravagant, but it really wasn't, given that it was $10. But I just bought all of it, and so now, I mean, it's a very modest amount of stuff that I have, but it has some real interesting curios. Hold on, let me see if I can.
It's unbelievable.
Oh yeah. So, for example, like lots of videotapes, and this one here that you can see. Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's his last movie that was barely released except
Was
on
that for the Playboy
cable.
Channel or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And so I got all of this strange stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
well,
But
now I definitely have to write it.
yeah.
So yeah, it was just a series of coincidental intersections that like basically made it an inevitability, I feel.
I just regretted the that we didn't have the chance. I had such a wonderful. It's I mean, this is now a I guess you could say, a, s- a common way of making a documentary, but where you hear the voice, Radley's
Yeah.
voice narrating the film and just showing archive and, just doing so, give him a great, the homage he deserved, But I'm glad you did it in a way, with Man of Taste. I
Thank
just
you.
want to add that he deserves it because there's so many talented filmmakers, who just, could shoot such beautiful movies on great locations like Radley. However, he was trying to do something different, like
Yeah.
he really saw that the erotica, which was such a part of everybody's life,
Hmm.
was could be made to be palatable and respected and artful, and then we see the torment. You're not even explicit in the book about him going through torment necessarily, but I feel it nevertheless by his having to constantly shift,
Yeah.
and become bifurcated and have to feel pressured by financial responsibilities and other things to have to make, hardcore films and then try to do something with that was special.
Hmm.
So I kind of felt those things coming from the book anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether I would use the word torment, but I mean, I'd choose a word that was probably within the same ballpark or vector space or whatever.
Uh-huh.
I think that when he effectively had to move into hardcore because the market for softcore just disappeared once, well, not entirely, but largely disappeared once Deep Throat came out. That I think that he did come to view those films as kind of an albatross around his neck in terms of his own aspirations and his own sense of what he wanted to realize as a filmmaker. So he ended up, I don't want to say compromising himself as though as though the hardcore work is in any way inferior. Like it's a different kind of filmmaking, right? But I think that he felt that his career trajectory somehow like jumps off the rails in the early
Hmm.
1970s, and I don't think he felt that he was ever able to get it back on track. Yeah, I mean, by the end of the '60s, he was, I mean, he wasn't a celebrity, but he was like a quasi public figure. Like he had profiles written about him in Gentleman's Quarterly. His films screened at Museum of Modern Art.
Absolutely.
But then, as soon as like the hardcore moment happens and he moves into that, he's never really able to enjoy that visibility again. Despite the fact that he would continue to make films for 15 years thereafter.
Right. You're not going on talk shows with Zsa Zsa Gabor and things like that with the
Right.
softcore films. He got such exposure.
Yeah.
And he handles
No pun
himself
intended.
with
Yeah.
such grace. Yes.
Yeah.
He handled himself with such grace with the naysayers. And I know you quoted Ashley West several times in your
Hmm.
book, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm friends with Ashley as well.
Oh, great.
And he interviewed you recently, right? You were on a panel discussion last week, was it?
Yeah,
Was
sort
he?
of. There was a book launch event at Columbia, and the way in which it was set up was this was through the Heyman Center for the Humanities, and their format is that I get to invite a number of people, someone who is within Columbia and in my department, someone who is, and then a second person who is within Columbia and not within my department, and then a third person who's totally like from outside. And so the totally outside person was Ashley. Because I mean, I think that, it is absolutely not an exaggeration to say that this book could not have been written without what Ashley and April have done at the Rialto Report. It's a remarkable resource, a remarkable website, a remarkable oral history, and they were like unfailingly generous in answering questions that I had like during the whole time that I was researching. So I was absolutely delighted to finally get a chance to like see them in person, and put faces to their famous, or at least famous to me, voices.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was actually, that was one of my next questions was going to be about the research because, it's such a well-researched book.
Oh, thank you.
And so I mean, it must be some living folks, right? Still people that have survived, as
Yeah, I
well
mean,
as the Rialto
obviously
report.
now we're looking at like 50 years, since the porno chic era. So they're all, getting on a bit, and I think that was the initial impetus behind what Ashley and April have been doing, which is
Right.
to let's get the oral history of this. Let's remember who these people were before before they pass, right? And yeah, in terms of the research, some of it was kind of conventional research, like the same stuff that I did for the volumes on Slapstick. You look at Variety, you look at the trade press, this, that, and the other.
Right.
A lot of it was eBay. It's something that I've read. I can't remember which adult film scholar said it, but the point was that everyone who researches adult film effectively has to create their own archive. Because there are no, like New York Public Library does not have a special, like,
Right.
porn section. Well, maybe it does, but
Like at the back
it
room of a
keeps it
video store,
secret.
like a back room of a video
Yeah,
store
yeah,
with a
yeah,
curtain, like some.
yeah. Well, that's always the
Really,
rumor
if
about.
there's been if there have been books written like I co-wrote Jerry Butler's biography Raw Talent. So if there's a book, it's in
Wow.
the human sexuality section.
Yeah,
But yeah, otherwise you're kind of on your own.
yeah. And so, I would, I remember I went through like all of the available issues on microfilm of Screw that I could find. Those were at New York Public Library. Then there are
I
whole
didn't know
runs.
that. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
Wow.
no, it's and that was kind of my baptism of fire. I think because that was early on in the research process, like around I want to say probably the summer of 2018 or maybe 2019. Like to go to the library to you know to you know to call up the microfilm, to have to ask the librarian because they had these, I know how a microfilm works, but then they had all these newfangled ones, like digital ones. And so I had to get someone to help me like load it up, and then the
Oh
person
my.
would see all the
Yeah.
pornographic images and stuff. And like also in like wide open, like, so that
Yeah.
there are researchers all around you.
Yeah.
I remember the first time my experience, I was sweating like as I was going through those pages.
But you
But
become immune like anything else?
yeah, you
Or
do. After a while, you just think this is my research. If you're going to judge me, that's your thing.
right.
It's not mine. And so, yeah, now it's kind of become like a no sweat kind of thing. I mean, metaphorically and literally, no
Literally.
sweat situation.
I was on a flight the other day, coming back from San Francisco, and I put on, I had downloaded on my computer the movie Queer,
Oh, right.
you know, and Luca Guadagnino's film, um, and it was a very empty flight, but nevertheless, there was a young woman sitting two seats over who was kind of like doing her own thing. But I realized after a very short time, I could not watch this film, such a public and contained space.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was perspiring, but so wait, but speaking of this is connected to that, Rob, and that is you are beholden to publish, right? Because you're an academic.
Yeah.
We've established you're a professor of cinema at Columbia,
Hmm.
and so you have to go before a committee with your idea for publishing, or you're given full license. How does that work?
Well, fortunately, I have the benefit of having tenure.
Okay.
So I guess this is like a post-tenure book, where it's like, okay, anything goes at this point. Now I could now I can write about what I really want to write about.
Snuff films are next. How does it
Yes,
work?
exactly.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't have to go before anyone actually
Oh,
at any
okay.
point. And like funnily enough, I wrote the book without even sharing chapters of it with publishers. And then once I had finished the whole thing, at least the first draft, I then sent it to Columbia University Press and was like, okay, so here's this book. I'd mentioned it to Philip Leventhal, the editor there. But rather than send him like, a chapter here, a chapter there, I just sent the whole thing, like, is this of interest? And it was, so that which
Wow.
I'm very fortunate that was his sense. So.
I found the duplicity of doing artistic erotic films and doing adult films. I could relate to it, and also using pseudonyms as
Right.
well. You handled that really well, and I think it's. I don't know that Radley was. I'm not sure if he was embarrassed or if it's just what society puts upon us. And I
Right.
think he put the same art into his adult films as he did with his softcore films.
Well, I mean, I would say that he put he applied the same craft to the adult films as he did to the softcore films. He didn't, he didn't have the same budget. He didn't have the same shooting schedule. So they were, in many cases, a lot more quickly turn around than his softcore films. But in terms of art, that's an interesting one because I think that if you look at the hardcore stuff versus the more just plain erotic movies or softcore, whatever you want to call them, from the 1960s, that they tend to fall into different genres, not just hardcore versus softcore, but also the hardcore films are comedies,
Right.
in a way that
Yeah.
the softcore films generally are not, with the single exception of Score, which is a comedy and which is kind of an oddball and unclassifiable movie anyway. But so I think he approached the hardcore films in a somewhat different way, thinking of them more as an opportunity to actually to let parts of his filmmaking personality come forth that he didn't really allow in his softcore work, which tends to be more serious, maybe sometimes a little bit self-serious in the case of some of the films like the Lickerish Quartet and that. But yeah, so there are differences. But I mean, his talent as a filmmaker is evident like across the board.
Was he able to get when he transitioned to hardcore? Was he able to also get the same quality of the above the line crew? I can't remember, like, because he was shooting art films, essentially. So he worked with some of the greatest European
Yeah,
crew, right? Didn't he?
yeah. I mean, I don't want to disparage or
Right.
cast any disparagement on the people that worked with him on the hardcore shoots. But there's no question that it was he was moving within a different circle there.
Yeah.
I mean, when he had been making the films, especially the films that he made in Italy, Camille 2000 and the Lickerish Quartet, I mean, he was working with like absolutely top flight filmmakers at that point. In particular, the costume designer and set designer Enrico Sabatini, who had a huge impact on the look of those two Italian films. I mean, Sabatini was responsible for all of contributed to the design of the plastic beds and mirrors in Camille 2000, the elaborate, I don't know if you've seen the Lickerish Quartet, but the strange library with the dictionary definitions of sexual terms on the floor.
Right on the
That's
floor.
Sabatini as well. I think that he was working with a very different group of people, and further evidence of that is in terms of the composers for the soundtracks for his movies. And the soundtracks for his softcore films are really quite exceptional, where he's working with, again, in those Italian movies, like, I mean, everyone loves the Italian soundtracks of the 1960s, associated with Morricone and others, and he's working with people that, of that caliber, exactly. But then, obviously, when he's making hardcore films, the music there is largely library music, which is that it's like it's pre-recorded or it's already out there, and you just acquire the license to like slap this music on, you know, on a scene if it works, and so on and so
Right.
forth. So without it at all meaning to disparage like the people that he worked with on the hardcore films, I mean, there's no question that he was working with the top echelons of European filmmaking talent in some of the late 60s work.
Yeah, I do recall though, and it's been a long time, but I remember which one of the hardcore were. I remember some beautiful shots of like the city, in a way, of New York City, that is, and
Yeah.
like the bus, someone riding a bus and just like
That's Naked Came the Stranger.
naked came. I must have
That's
seen that.
the double-decker bus where
Yes,
someone at the top is where they're
and they're having
having sex.
sex. Yeah,
Well,
but
you
there's some.
can see that the bus is genuinely driving up and down Fifth Avenue and
Yeah.
stuff while
So yeah,
all this is
amazing,
happening.
really amazing, but some pretty amazing. But it is of its time in the way, like, non hard, pornography was being made, in New York City, right?
Right.
Um, by some of the young lions. Yeah.
Yeah. Although, yeah, I mean, I think that that's obviously one of the key points of appeal of many of the kind of sexploitation films and porn films of the
Right.
60s and then the 70s is that they are almost like kind of time capsules.
They're documentaries.
Right. They're unintentional documentaries of
Right.
like what it was like in New York and Times Square back in the
Right.
day, right?
Yeah.
And that's obviously like a pleasure that one gets from many of these films. Not so much with the Metzger films, I think, because of his tendency to look to Europe as the place where he wants to be shooting his films. But certainly there's a lot of good coverage of Manhattan in Naked Gun, The Stranger, and Private Afternoons of Pamela Mann, to a lesser extent maybe in Maraschino Cherry, but yeah.
I just want to make sure we also include the fact that the book really is also a really thorough look at the business behind, Radley's art, his storytelling and his art, which is, the films that he made, both as Radley Metzger and to some lesser degree, perhaps Henry Paris. But
Hmm.
there was the Audubon, production company that
Yes.
he ran with his partner.
Arva Leighton. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, so the book does go into great detail about, you know, him as a businessman as well. And it's a big
It
part of the
seems they
book.
were very successful doing doing their films. I mean, he did a film a year, whether he did it himself or he purchased a film for
Yeah.
since 1963, like for 20 years practically.
Yeah.
That's pretty astounding.
Yeah, no, I mean I think that his role as head of Audubon and the role of Audubon is really worth exploring. It's this was an independent distributor. He would go to Europe and acquire titles that he felt had some exploitable or sexploitable value, bring them back to the US. If he felt that they needed a little bit more sexploitable value, he would shoot some
Right.
striptease sequence and just throw it in the
Just,
middle. Uh,
Yes.
but there's a great number of, I would say, kind of important films that Audubon was responsible for bringing to the US. Perhaps the most impactful was I, a Woman, with the success of which that was a film that was released in the US 66 and then into 67, but it had very long legs. I, a Woman, like effectively like bankrolled like Audubon's future history at that point. But also The Libertine film, the Italian title is La Matriarca, and The Laughing Woman, original title Femina Ridens. These are really some significant and interesting late 60s, kind of softcore sexploitation titles. So yeah, I mean, I think that Metzger's authorship is not, or we should think of him not just as a director, or think of his authorship not just in terms of the films that he was directing, but his authorship is also a matter of the films that he was importing. Because they helped to establish a kind of brand identity
Mhm.
for Audubon that effectively he then, as a filmmaker, kind of stepped into
Right. Yeah.
the space
He
that
sort of
he had
slipped
made
right
for
into this
himself.
mode.
Right.
It's like he
Yeah,
created the vehicle and then he just sort of jumped into the driver's seat or something like that.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
amazing.
And what I really found fascinating was he was just a guy who loved film. I mean,
Yes.
from editing films when he got out of the military, and he just loved film. He loved watching them. He loved making them. He loved buying them, and he kind of lived his dream and was successful. It seemed that he was.
No, he was a huge cinephile, and actually, let me just
Oh,
pull out
more
more
eBay
kind of show and tell
artifacts.
stuff. But so one of the great pleasure, I have so many of these videotapes and like
Yeah.
mini DVs and stuff like that. You know, all the mini DVs are in a big box up there. But one of the pleasures of getting these transferred and then looking at them digitally. I mean, you'll remember this. You'll both remember this from the days of VCRs, right? Where
Hmm.
a videotape becomes like a palimpsest of all of the other things that you've recorded. Like, yeah, so that when one recording ends, you'll
Yeah.
get like a split second of something else, and then a split second of something else with all of the, all of the static and stuff, and then it'll move into another, anyway. And some of those videotapes of that I got from Metzger's storage unit are like those palimpsests as well, that you just get these brief split second of another movie that he recorded and then recorded over.
Right.
And so it's kind of fascinating to
Hmm.
see like what these films are. There was only one that I was able to identify, and that was with any degree of confidence. And this actually speaks to my previous identity as a historian of slapstick comedy, and that's the Harold Lloyd film Speedy.
Oh,
So
wow.
he had like a recording of Speedy for some reason that then he recorded over.
How dare you?
Well, thank God that he did, because now we got the surviving footage of
That's true.
outtakes and things like that. But yeah,
Right. Yeah, yeah,
Speedy.
that's amazing.
Susan Lloyd is doing well enough, like preserving her father, Harold Lloyd's materials. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it also, I felt really good that people helped you out in the industry, like Stephen Morowitz of
Oh yeah,
DistribuPix helped you out. And,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I think people in the adult industry to be legitimized and to be thought of seriously, and to be dealt with respect, it really means a lot to them. So they just roll out the red carpet like Ashley and like Stephen.
Yep.
It's great.
No, I would totally agree with that. That I did not encounter anyone at any time who was like, leave me alone, or
Mhm.
no, this is mine, I'm not going to let you look at it, or anything along those lines. Everyone was unfailingly generous. Which I can't say has been the case with other things that I've researched and studied, where people can sometimes be, especially like silent film material, like, I
Hmm.
have this, no one else has this, this is mine. But I encountered none of that, and Stephen was absolutely generous. Anything that I asked for, the rights to just reprint something and put it in the book, like, gratis. Yep, just go ahead, no problem.
That's another wonderful thing about your book is the visuals to support something that you described. You had a lot of screen captures and posters and things like that, and I thought it really brought it to life.
Thank you. I mean, it's an interesting one, because yeah, I have like this kind of this kind of photographic insert like in
Hmm.
the middle, and I think that in part it reflects my own research process, which, as mentioned, you have to build your own archive when you're researching this kind of stuff, and so there's a lot of eBay purchasing that goes into a book like this. But then at the end of the day, what am I going to do with all of these posters that I now have stuck in a drawer somewhere? I got two 12-year-old kids. I can't put them up in my apartment. But at least I can kind of share them, by including
Have
like
you,
the photographic insert. So yeah.
Rob, have you ever thought about getting a storage unit?
Yes. It'll just be handed down forever like
Yeah.
these. Yeah. It's Yeah, no, that's a good one. Although, this I don't mean to imply that this stuff is just going to end up in a storage unit with the rest of my junk. That I want to donate this to an archive.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I'd like to give it to Columbia Rare Book and Manuscript because because Metzger was at Columbia, like he studied
right.
at Columbia, so why not?
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
not bring him
Yeah.
home?
yeah, deservedly. Again, the name of the book is Man of Taste. The author is Rob King. The subtitle, The Erotic Cinema of Radley Metzger, published by Columbia University Press, and it's currently available.
Yes.
Uh, Cathy Brown, thank you so much for co-hosting. She is, among other things, the author of. I'm going to plug your book too, since you're here, Immigrant Hearts. Have you written a number of other? You must
I
have,
have
because this is too
that's
well
my
written
eighth.
for it to be your first. What?
That's my eighth novel,
Eighth
and
novel? We
yes,
should be
it's
interviewing you. What's
Yeah, well, you should tell people about Immigrant Hearts. It seems that you can't be on a podcast where I'm the only one promoting their book.
well, you did a wonderful
well?
job.
Here's your.
Thank you, Rob.
No, but what is
Yeah,
Immigrant Hearts?
tell us. It's about. I know
Immigrant
it's about your
Hearts.
family. It's a little about your
Yes, it
family, your
was
ancestors.
inspired. Was inspired by my grandparents' courtship story on how they met. Two people in the tailor trade, a seamstress and a tailor, fell in love in Brooklyn and built a life together.
Dare we say an
And it's
immigrant story?
yes. And so many people have told me it's so close to their own family histories, and I think it's sparking a lot of discussion between about immigrants and especially the administration that we have currently that is so anti-immigrant. I hope that my book shows all the contributions immigrants have made to society.
And actually, I guess there's like a hidden connection with Radley Metzger there again, because he, like early on, I think he went to a textile or Stravenmuller textile high school or something.
Yes,
So maybe he he at one point he was on the same path did you say your parents or grandparents?
grandparents,
Your
grandparents.
grandparents were on, but I
Yes.
guess ultimately his path forked in a rather different way.
Did that might explain why he was such a snazzy dresser
He was
because he was
very
very
stylish.
cultured and
Yeah,
yeah, very handsome.
very
Yes.
hands
Yeah.
right to the end. Even though he was just in his shirt sleeves when I would meet him.
I never saw him look anything but formal. Like he was
Yeah,
always with the cravat.
right. Yeah, and he had a good head of hair.
Yes, not everyone
I
can say
mean, I,
that.
pardon me. um, thank you both, and Rob. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, it seems that every time I write about or every time I work on someone who's somehow involved in distribution, whether it's Ira Deutschman or Radley
Oh yeah.
Metzger, you come calling. So I guess I'll have to figure out another distributor to start writing about.
Yeah, well, I've been doing this podcast for 14 years now.
Oh wow.
So there are thousands of conversations, I guess, but it's like, all the overlapping, the Venn diagram is inevitable.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
I'd
yeah.
imagine so.
So thank you very much.
No, thank
Thank you. This
you.
was fun.
Yeah, and it was really nice. Well, nice to see you again, Adam,
Thank you.
and nice to meet you, Cathy. And hopefully we can stay in touch, and maybe I don't know, who knows what will come of it.
Yes. Thank you.
Terrific.
All right. Well, have a great evening, guys.
Okay,
You too.
take
Thanks,
care.
Adam.
Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye now. Bye.